Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the developing situation with regards to Pakistan and China making efforts underway with reference to putting forward a new bloc and to replace the now defunct SAARC. And this is very, very important and unfortunate given the kind of history that we have seen with this particular body and in specific reference to Pakistan and India relations, and of course the way in which India has responded and acted irresponsibly, which has of course resulted in a number of redundant summits with problems such as visas not being given to Pakistani businessmen, with of course boycotting the summits hosted by Pakistan and other such issues, which is a huge issue with regards to any such bloc, whether or not it puts forward a united stance. And so with reference to what we've seen previously by India, it seems that a new bloc is on the horizon, and these efforts have been underway between Pakistan and China for quite some time now, and seems like other countries including Bangladesh, Afghanistan are also keen to join. So we're going to be taking a look at what that means, particularly in what ways that this new bloc will be different and what sort of a countermeasure would it be to spoilers like India in the region, and how will it address the key issues that we know SAARC faced. That is going to be the focus of our show today. For this and more, as always in the studios, I'm joined by senior analyst Farooq Patafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by Ms. Salma, who's a foreign affairs expert, and she's going to be joining us later on. Faisal, let me begin with you with reference to what we've seen so far, particularly in the ways that SAARC has not been able to perform in the past couple of summits, particularly in the ways that India, of course, has created problems for this particular platform to function. I want your take on what sort of new platform do you envision that would help with more racial peace and stability?
Yeah, obviously, Sana, when we talk about the new bloc, I believe that it can emerge in coming, obviously, time. That is entirely related to an economic bloc that would encircle around India, because India has a habit of being a bully towards smaller neighbors. India has a habit of being a hegemon towards these smaller neighbors, be it Myanmar, be it Bhutan, be it Nepal, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and even Maldives as well. But when it comes towards Pakistan, of course, it gets a befitting reply from our side. And why I say that this is going to be a pivotal for economy of the region, because there are countries, smaller countries, who have been relying upon trading with India, like Nepal and then Bhutan as well. But at the same time, of course, when we talk about China has a huge influence on both of these countries. And when we talk about Myanmar, China has presence there. When we talk about Bangladesh, of course, Bangladesh is having excellent relations, economic relations with China. And when we talk about Pakistan, of course, it's an open secret now, and the whole world knows about the kind of relations ironclad brothers, both of them, they are having, Pakistan and China. And when it comes to Afghanistan, it is interesting to see that Afghanistan, of course, will be playing a role in it as well, because it has a role. We have always highlighted from this show that Afghanistan is pivotal when we talk about connecting CPAC with the Central Asian republics, and through Central Asian republics ending up to Russia. And of course, connectivity for Pakistan is pivotal as well when it comes to Central Asian republics. And Afghanistan carries a huge importance in that. And gone are the days when, of course, Afghanistan had only one trade, and that was that, of course, there was turbulent atmosphere in there, in terms of there were warlords, and there were people entirely relying upon the smuggling and all of that. I think they have learned many lessons, and now they must be thinking about, of course, adjusting their economy as well. And their economy can only, of course, fix itself through generating more opportunities for the people. And I believe if CPAC is getting connected with the Central Asian republics, that would be an excellent opportunity for Afghanistan as well. So this circle. I think we should call it a golden circle around India. That golden circle would ensure the connectivity, economic connectivity, and then all of these countries, they will make sure that any of the country trying to use one of the country, like we know that India uses Afghanistan to of course engage Pakistan on the western front, them all countries would never allow a country like India, a spoiler like India, to use their land to be used against Pakistan. And I think the resolve against all of the miscreants and all of the menace which is invested by and which is financed by the Indian RAW, they will be countered, and still they are being countered by Pakistan. But all of the countries, owing to the progress in terms of economy, of course they will be making it possible. And when we talk about Iran as well, Iran will be interested in this bloc. Now how it in coming days it can liquidate itself, that will be very interesting to see. So far, of course, we can simply say that this is going to be pivotal for the region.
Absolutely. And Farooq, I want your perspective on this, and then particularly, of course, when we talk about the core problem and in the ways that we look at both the functionality of the body and then, of course, players such as India that are spoiling it. How do we move forward with this new bloc being more functional? Is India going to be a part of it or not?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think whatever Faisal said was a political interpretation of what is happening. Of course, that is important, but we South Asians pay too much attention to politics. When SAARC was born, actually, essentially, SAARC wasn't that much a political body. It was meant for regional cooperation. But as always, India-Pakistan hostility, takes over and holds anybody, hostage. We saw that happening in SEO as well. But now, what is happening? Since Narendra Modi came to power, SAARC is almost dead. And since then, he has actually tried to create another alternative body called BIMSTEC. And that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, because India, as Faisal and you both actually pointed out, India is a part of the problem. It is a stumbling block. It is also a bully. Now, what do? China has been actually trying to get India and Pakistan work together for quite some time in economic field, in commerce, in trade, because China understands that the future is defined by economy, not merely wasteful projection of power. So China actually was trying to do this, but unfortunately India doesn't seem to prove or want to prove that it wants to be part of the solution. And that was just proven by SEO, Defense Minister event, where India once again caused the absence of an agreement between all the countries, right? So in that situation, what is China to do? China and Pakistan are rightly pointed out, blood brothers, iron brothers. I call them blood brothers, but they have actually worked together for quite some time. And now, because India keeps on bullying other regional partners, including now Myanmar, so one by one, every country, including Bhutan, that was actually essentially thought to be an extension of India's own power. And all those countries have actually drifted towards China rather than India. Why? Because China actually knows how to export progress, how to export growth into other countries. So I think that gradually all these countries in the region are going to come together. And unfortunately, as Faisal was pointing out, there is going to be one consequence is that India is going to call it encirclement. I wouldn't, because India is also welcome to join, but India's problem is in the current headspace. India is only going to be part of the problem and make yet another body irrelevant. So India is not going to be part of it, and thank goodness for that. All other countries are actually going to prosper. India can go wherever it wants to go.
Right. Let's also welcome in the debate Ms. Salma Malik, foreign affairs expert who's joined us online. Thank you very much, Ms. Salma, for being part of the show. And I'm going to speak to you with reference to, of course, when we talk about SAARC and we try to understand what it is that the body represented and then what is it in terms of the new bloc that we can expect. And so I want your take on a little bit about what this platform means for the particular region and in the ways that these platforms, even when we talk about other platforms such as United States, the United Nations even, how do we make these platforms functional for the countries that they represent? And when we talk about the region, particularly from Pakistan's perspective, what will be an effective bloc in your perspective?
Thank you so much for having me in your show. Actually, SAARC, unfortunately, as a regional bloc, was destined to fail in a sense that when SAARC was created, despite the fact that there was a lot of goodwill behind SAARC and several countries put their weight behind SAARC, um, India never really wanted SAARC to work because, and that became very evident with time because it was number one, a smaller state initiative, and India wasn't getting the type of role that it wanted to get in SAARC. Secondly, it was a forum which had a consensus-based agreement, and also the fact that every country would be treated equally, which of course was unavoidable because when we look at SAARC and we look at South Asia's composition, it is next to impossible to have countries which perform equally because Bhutan and India, despite being neighbors, but despite having 1+1 vote, have a very different composition. But what would be an ideal regional configuration to speak? An ideal regional body or any institution would be which actually ends up doing the work which is mandated for. If SAARC was supposed to look at non-traditional security concerns, some of those goalposts that it managed to do, it should have stuck to that factor only and not become hostage to the whims and fancies of India or any bigger country. And that is the tragedy behind SAARC. And this is exactly also the tragedy behind now when we look at United Nations organization, that it has only and only become a mouthpiece for the US, for other countries, any amount of resolutions, any sanctions, which are at best selective, do not end up redressing the problems which are faced by victim states, faced by human rights concerns and all, which makes UN actually a very helpless and a very toothless organization. And unless and until we really want to have international peace, stability, we need to make these organizations perform as per the mandate for which they were performed, for which they were made. If SAARC or SAARC, I would say actually it is in a really a dead situation at the moment. But if UN also ends up doing exactly what it is doing at the moment, just playing up to the galleries, allowing the US and Israel and countries such as these any amount of interaction up to, that would also make UN a totally dysfunctional bureaucracy and nothing more than that.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, Faisal.
Yeah, Dr. Salma, when we talk about multilateralism, of course, world is heading towards the multilateralism, but a very controlled one, not the crowd lateralism, in which, of course, as you have rightly pointed out, the United Nations is becoming toothless. It's just like League of the Nations. Nobody stopped Hitler doing whatever he was doing, and then of course, when we talk about League of Nations, it wasn't there to be seen anymore. And same is the case with today's United Nations. When we talk about United Nations will to do or will to implement something, of course, it isn't there. Can we say that crowd lateralism is being shunned by the world because there are might is right aspect within it? But when we talk about multilateralism at a controlled regional level, that can be successful. Reason being, it would entirely be on the basis of economic cooperation amongst the countries.
My deepest apologies. I've lost your last sentence. It came out garbled. Can you please repeat?
Yeah, I was saying that in the midst of the chaos world was seeing for nearly more than 2 years, of course we can say that crowd lateralism is not being favored at all, because I feel that United Nations is not going to be cup of tea of the countries. Reason being, everyone knows that might is right everywhere. But when we talk about the regional level, multilateralism on the basis of economic domains, that is going to be very successful.
And Dr. Salma, allow me to actually add to the question, because we are talking about potential of cooperation between these various SAARC countries with China and Pakistan. What exactly are the major commonalities where all these countries can work together? And of course, we are not talking about politics, we are talking about economics and other elements where they might be able to work together.
Right. Thank you so much, Farrow. Thank you so much for the question. From what I get, and I would try to make the best of because the voice was kind of breaking. Um, when we look at SAARC, its composition, as I said earlier, was primarily to look at non-traditional security concerns, and it did not absolutely go for bilateralism, because the fear was that in case there is inclusion of bilateralism into SAARC, it would always be a consensus-based multilateral forum based on the seven and then eight SAARC countries, South Asian countries. Bilateralism was discouraged because there was always this fear that anything that will happen in SAARC would be then dominated by India and Pakistan's traditional security concerns. And that is why, A, it was purely non-traditional, B, it was not bilateral, it was multilateral. But then what we saw was that as SAARC progressed, and whenever India and Pakistan were not talking to each other, there was a lean phase in the relations between the two countries. SAARC also provided with a very convenient space where, under the guise of multilateralism, both these countries, or any other countries for that matter, India and Bangladesh as well, India and Sri Lanka at one time as well, they would meet as part of what then later became an informal formal setup called the retreat. And they would meet over breakfast or over tea, and they would discuss. And SAARC actually ended up becoming a very viable forum through which India and Pakistan's rapprochement happened post Kargil, and then we saw the composite dialogue process taking place. Even prior to that, if we look at the 1980s, the end of 1980s, Rajiv Gandhi and Benazir Bhutto, when they met for the SAARC summit in Islamabad, that culminated in the signing of the first round of CBMs between these two countries on the traditional, strategic, and non-traditional realm. So that was something fascinating. But then what we see is that um, a future configuration, such as that which is being thought about between India, Pakistan, China, and Bangladesh, the commonality of interest here, of course, would be economics, the economic uplift, and it's not going to be a very exclusive club. From what we hear and what the various news groups are speculating is that every SAARC country would be offered a seat on the table, and even India would be invited to this. So it is not something that is being done to counter India or to take India out of this. Unfortunately, the South Asian countries have not themselves invested at all in maintaining and reviving SAARC. Whenever India talks about SAARC or reviving such a forum, of course, it has ended up creating several alternatives to SAARC, which again have not really faced a very great future. They're also kind of in a comatose situation. But what we talk about is a SAARC minus one, and that minus one is Pakistan. And interestingly, you cannot have a SAARC minus one because Pakistan is nestled right in between Afghanistan and India. in case of this future SAARC plus 2 that we are looking at coming from the Chinese, again, what we see is that despite the fact that Pakistan and Bangladesh are on board for any such dialogue, we are not keeping it at all exclusive. China is very open to having any kind of non-traditional a non-interference based economic cooperation and uplift program, and this is also going to be part of that. So let's see if India takes up this offer and what they respond to that. But from what I kind of foresee is that it's going to be a very negative response coming from India, or at least they would take their time to warm up to this idea. And even if they warm up to this idea, they would be very cautious about how and what will happen. But if you
Right.
have too many spoilers in the picture,
Ms. Salma,
yes.
but I want to understand then when you talk about SAARC's failure essentially and what it wasn't able to achieve. I want your understanding then in terms of what really is the structural change in this new body that we're proposing, because at the end of the day, do you think that it'll just be another name which is different, because it involves the same countries more or less, and it involves of course the same influence of geopolitics and economy. So what will be different in terms of the structure that would guarantee some tangible action?
You see, at this moment, we really don't know as to what picture would come out eventually. But China has that type of clout where it remains very non-conflictual, and it has over the last 1 decade managed to develop a pretty strong portfolio when it comes to dispute resolution and conflict resolution between various countries. China has played a very strong third-party mediator's role, and China is going to be the powerful country in this future configuration when it comes about, which means that India is not going to have that type of an assertive role that China. That having China in this particular grouping would have. But at the same time, would China and India actually manage to stay within this grouping? One side of the story is yes, because China and India have a lot of common economic interest, trade and commerce taking place. India is also part of various Chinese Belt and Road Initiative projects. So India shouldn't really get deterred by that. Also, a lot of curiosity would draw India into this particular forum. Would China restrict it to SAARC only? Let's see. Perhaps they might actually end up including some other countries that would make it a little different from SAARC, and have more countries as part of that that would actually make more stakeholders having a stake in peace, progress, economic development, and enhancement of trade and commerce in large. So that would actually make these countries not remain hostage to the South Asian regional politics, but look beyond that.
Yeah, Dr. Salma, obviously, when we talk about India as a state before Modi, of course, we can say that SAARC was, I mean, there were hiccups, but still it worked. It worked to serve its purpose. But when it comes to Modi's rule, since Modi's rule, that is almost 11 years now, we are seeing that SAARC has never been given the importance it should have been given, and it can be simply said that Modi never wants to have any bilateral relations with the neighboring countries on the equal levels. He just wants to maintain hegemony over the neighbors, and that is not being accepted by all of the neighbors. So can we say that Modi's existence in BJP, obviously in the politics in today's India, is causing the SAARC to simply destroy itself? And the day when we see a change in the regime in India, that might help revive SAARC once more?
I think that's a very, very important question. I think you're absolutely right about this. That most of the deterioration SAARC has faced is after Moody's coming into power, 2014, and after that we see that nothing could actually manage to revive SAARC. There were two opportunities when SAARC could have actually been revived and fulfilled its mandate as a non-traditional security concern organization, and that was the COVID and later any of these natural disasters that take place. So SAARC could have played its role. SAARC did play its role in older years when it was functional, but did it do it to the peak of its performance? Unfortunately, not. Even then, it was a very checkered history, yet it worked. And after 2014, we see in these last 11 years, there has been no progress at all when it comes to SAARC. So from what I see, with Modi being in power, he has made SAARC so irrelevant and redundant that tomorrow the need for having a regional organization and the drift between the countries would become so great that they would not actually feel the need for a regional organization. But having said that, whenever the civil society of South Asia, they come together and they meet, all of us feel that there's a ardent need for having a regional body that not only represents the aspirations of the entire region, the people of the region, and that is what basically SAARC was meant to perform or meant to portray the aspirations, the problems, the development, and the focus on the people of South Asia, what their problems are with regards clean drinking water, with regards food security, with regards health security. So one aspect could be that if there's a future Indian government which is prudent enough and which does not have the type of emotional and ideological baggage the way Modi is carrying, then that particular government might actually feel that reviving SAARC is a great idea and that it should be. And we also still have certain structures of SAARC which are performing, one of which is very importantly the South Asian University, which has a major campus in Delhi. Now, the main problem with India when it comes to SAARC was that India wanted to take the entire lead and the entire control over SAARC. And this is what they have done by making SAARC redundant, by pressurizing the other regional actors. And I think in a future configuration, when we have China as part of that, many of the South Asian neighbors, they would feel that there's an alternative other than India, so they may not feel as pressurized as it could be. And we should also be mindful of the fact that post 2019, many countries in South Asia actually feel that India is asserting itself a lot more and pulling its weight a lot more than it is required. So those countries are definitely, namely Bangladesh, Nepal, even Maldives, Sri Lanka, and those countries are actually looking forward to having some kind of an alternative which provides them a relief from India. But today it's India, tomorrow it can be some other country that is not very happy with the SAARC process or being on the table with any other regional neighbors. So once again, that would make SAARC hostage to the whims and fancies of any of the regional countries. So one can think of one alternative could be to review and reform the SAARC Charter, a notion which has always been talked about and been much deliberated upon. Can there be some kind of reform? Can it be made better? But again, for that, you require all of the regional actors to come on table, and that is the main issue. Where would they come on table? Which country, which capital is acceptable to them? And a proposal coming from Pakistan, would India be comfortable and would India politically endorse Pakistan's proposal and vice versa? So there's so many things that create a hiccup in this. And also the fact that non-traditional concerns are also becoming securitized mainly the water issue, the Indus Water Treaty. So, would the non-traditional security concerns actually remain non-traditional only, or would they actually have a crossover and become traditional security problems? So, these are the few concerns which make, among so many others, that make SAARC redundant, that makes SAARC very difficult to revive. But as I said, one alternative could be to revive SAARC. The second alternative, which India has already worked upon, is to disregard SAARC and have another regional body. But again, because India pulls its weight so much that even those regional bodies such as the BIMSTEC and all, they haven't really worked. A third is having a supra regional body, which includes China, something that is being worked upon. So one can only see and observe and see as to how successful this particular proposal would be and how many South Asian neighbors warm up to this particular idea. Because one also must remember
Uh, yes, Ms. Selma.
that initially authored SAARC's charter and forwarded this notion to the rest of the neighboring regional countries.
Ms. Salma, can you also add to the possibility of when we talk about developing economic relations and trade ties between the countries in the new bloc? There were reports previously also with regard to whether or not there can be a different way that these regional countries actually trade with each other, maybe less dependency on the dollar, and have more local currencies coming up and more relations developing on that front. Could there be a system for these countries that can be developed that enhances our trade relations and lowers our dependency on the West?
You see, the fact that China had the BRI, with CPEC being the only bilateral link, and rest of those being multi-country economic corridors, having a regional configuration or a configuration with China as part of that was a natural next step and would be a natural next step, because you have all of these countries coming together, joining hands in an economic corridor relationship which goes beyond South Asia, goes beyond Southern Asia. It goes to the Middle East, it goes to Africa, other countries. And then, of course, the fact that many of these countries already have China as part of their economic development parameters, and then they're coming together and coordinating with each other, or developing a regional body that eventually looks at a common currency for trade and commerce, having an alternate system, because many of the countries are now facing a situation where they feel the IMF and World Bank being punitive bodies at times, and the US using them as a means to punish, to coerce, as well as make countries comply to its whims and fancies. So if China is there to provide an alternative, perhaps it may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen day after tomorrow, but eventually you do see, and this is one of the major concerns the US and the West is facing at the moment, is that China is gradually and with a very steady speed coming up to a point where it is going to provide an alternative economic order to the countries that partner with China. And that would make the US system, US institutions, financial institutions, commercial institutions redundant. So this is something that may actually also end up creating a lot of trade wars and have a lot of US negative interference in countries that are siding with China. But this is an eventuality that the US is looking at, and China is also coming up with. And many of the countries who are already facing the brunt of Western economic and trade institutions would want to sign up for this.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Salma Malik, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. Farooq, I want your input on this as well, particularly when we talk economic and trade relationships. Can we really foster a more comprehensive regional trade bloc as opposed to our dependency on the West?
Right, Sana. The problem with any discussion about any of this kind of body is that we end up actually talking about zero-sum game, right?
Yeah.
Either it is Western influence or whether it is local influence. I believe that all countries can actually work together and prosper, right? The fact about regional competition is because West is far, far away, and all these countries are situated next to each other. You can work with it. But then I wanted to actually go back to certain things that were said about Modi and China, and I want to actually frame this in two contexts, which is very important. On one side, you have to actually look at the immediate, that is of course the framing, as was pointed out, the Second World War at that time, between fascism and socialism, right? Modi seems to be projecting some kind of fascism, whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And on the other side, China, while it is a capitalist country also, it has three represents, but it also calls itself a socialist polity. So what exactly is the framing? When Hitler, and I don't mean to use Hitler's name to compare any leader with anybody, I'm just actually referencing history. When Hitler actually attacked Russia, Henry Kissinger says that at that time, bogies, train bogies full of coal were still going from Russia inside Germany because they had a trade pact, right? So what is the difference? Socialism would essentially focus on economic power, right, or uplifting of people, and fascism would essentially go for wars or confrontation just because they want to, and they need to, and they feel entitled to, right? This is the immediate, and that's why India becomes such a bad partner. But then there is also a systemic issue, a broader context, right? And how that actually works. All those countries that you mentioned, minus China, all are post-colonial countries, right? All post-colonial countries have one thing in common, and that is post-colonial bureaucracy. And colonial bureaucracy's essential functions was to control, not to delegate, not to serve, right? And on one side you have these post-colonial, India is the prime example of that. That is why, while it might actually project other political issues on this, there is also this sense of helplessness within India's system, that bureaucracy makes everything so impossible to function that India has to actually look political and cannot cooperate with other countries. So much red tape. On the other side, there is China, which has just look at the evolution. Buddhism, Taoism, Buddhism, and then Confucianism, and then socialism. Confucian value system essentially talks about two very important things. One, the ruler's responsibility to serve to the people. That is very important. The second is how Confucianism actually expanded in China. So their bureaucracy was essential, it was critical. Even Francis Fukuyama makes a note about that, how effective that was. And the focus used to be on education. So now the problem is that when you work with China, China starts delivering results. When you work with India, what happens? Countries like Pakistan can still renegotiate their bureaucracy, maybe other post-colonial countries. But India is such a massive country that it creates problems rather than solutions. So India will someday have to realize that it has to change its governance model, otherwise it won't be a good partner to any country. May it be America, may it be Israel, may it be China, may it be Pakistan, even good partner to its own people, because again the bureaucracy is the same, whose essential purpose is to control, not to serve.
Right, absolutely. Faisal, I want your perspective on this too, because do you think that this would make any difference to the situation?
Yes, Sanab, earlier, of course, when I was listening to Dr. Salma Malik, she pointed out that if all of the countries they do agree and India is agreeing as well, then where should we be holding this first meeting? I mean, if somebody would say that let's hold it in Pakistan, India would suddenly say no, let's go to Dubai, because this is what is happening. Whenever Pakistan is going to play its role, of course they are going to find a neutral venue for them, and as they always look for in cricket, and they always say that we can only play in Dubai rather than coming to Pakistan. So they will always play a spoiler's role. That's why my initial stance, which is going to be the ultimate stance on this, that India, if becomes part of it, will always be a spoiler, will always be a spoiler. Reason being, India has a huge baggage, and that baggage is entirely the negativity, and it is entirely just creating troubles for others. So when we are talking about economic cooperation, I mean, we very well know that when Pakistan and China were heading towards CPEC, and the kind of work has been done on CPEC, and it is ongoing right now. At the same time, India had its own design, and that was that we will go and take the Chabahar, and from Chabahar we will be making our own sort of connectivity with the Afghanistan and with the rest of the world, and we don't want to, of course, utilize CPEC, though if it was the only cooperation that India was looking for, if it was economic cooperation, the things would have been so different even for India as well in terms of economic gains. I mean, Pakistan would gain out of it as well, but India will gain as well. Same is the case with the TAPI, like projects. If TAPI is a success, of course all other countries would be benefiting out of it, especially India itself, because that would be, of course, taking facilitating its population with that opportunity. But when it comes with these kind of projects like Chabahar, and then connecting it with the rest of the world, and superseding the CPEC, and we don't want to use it, it's entirely about creating troubles for others.
Right.
And if we obviously look at the tactics of sabotaging Pakistan's and China's initiative to change the lives of the people of Pakistan and people of the region, then of course we can see the kind of role India plays. People like Kulbhushan Jadavs and people like so many others who roam around here only for one reason, just to sabotage the kind of advancement we are looking for.
Right. Yes, Farooq, you want to add something?
Because Faisal mentioned BRI, let me remind everybody, when BRI was first initiated, and its first top summit was to take place at that time, America was also invited. It was India which threw a temper tantrum because there was mention of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Because of that, they threw this tantrum, and after that, because at that time they had influence on the Trump 1 administration, they kind of created an environment in which America was not to actually come. They just sent the ambassador. Just imagine a world where BRI and America's influence could be connected, and how much wealth could be created for everybody. But then here comes the stupidity of the whole political situation in South Asia, that India and Pakistan both are actually being killed by horrible temperatures. And the climate change issue is so important. SAARC had proper birth in it, focusing on these things, then culture, then economics, then literature, so much else. But because they cannot work together, and because India is such a drama queen, we end up destroying, India ends up destroying all such fora. And that is unfortunate. Otherwise, we could have been, the human race could have gained so much, because India and China are two of the most populous countries in the world. Pakistan is 5th. If we work together, poverty alleviation, so much more, climate change could have been addressed, we could have been so happy. But unfortunately, India does not seem to want to do that.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Farooq, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. As always, that we have time for, we'll now see you tomorrow.